You walk into the spare room, or the back bedroom, or down into the cellar, and you smell it before you see it. That musty, heavy, damp smell that means trouble. And then you see it, the black spots creeping up the corner of the wall, the dark bloom behind the wardrobe, the window running with water every single morning, the clothes in the closet gone musty, the wall cold and wet to the touch, damp and mold. And it is not just ugly, it eats away at your home, it rots the wood and ruins the plaster and stains everything it touches. And worst of all, it is bad for your lungs, bad for your chest, bad for anyone in the house who already struggles to breathe. So what does everyone do? They go out and buy an electric dehumidifier, a machine that hums away day and night, pulling water from the air and running up the power bill month after month. And you have to empty it and clean it and pay to run it forever. Now picture a family high in the old mountains, where the air is cold and wet, where the fog rolls in and the snow melts and the damp seeps up from the ground, and where there was no electricity at all, not a single watt. And ask yourself, how did they keep their homes dry? Because they did. Their homes stayed dry and fresh and free of mold through the wettest, coldest seasons, with no machine and no power bill, using simple tricks that cost almost nothing. By the end of this video, you will know every one of those mountain methods, step by step, the moisture catchers you can make for pennies, how to stop the damp at its source, how to kill the mold safely, and the old habits that keep a whole home dry. Stay with me, because the last trick, the one that gets to the real root of damp, is the one that ends the problem instead of just mopping it up forever. Let me start with the truth about damp that the old folks understood and most people today do not. Damp is just water in the air and water where it should not be, and there are only two ways to beat it. You either stop the water from getting in and building up, or you pull the moisture back out of the air. That is the whole of it. The expensive machine does only the second half. It pulls moisture from the air, and it does it while eating power and never touching the reasons the room is damp in the first place. The old mountain folk worked both halves, and they did it with no power at all, because they understood that moisture in a home comes from somewhere and goes somewhere, and if you manage where it comes from and give it a way out, and you set out simple things that drink the moisture from the air, you can keep a room dry without a machine ever entering into it. They knew that warm, moving air carries moisture away, and that cold, still air lets it settle and soak into the walls. They knew that certain simple substances drink water right out of the air, and they knew how to stop the damp coming up from the ground and in from the rain. None of it needed electricity, because none of it had electricity, and yet it worked through generations in some of the wettest mountain air there is. If you believe that the old self-reliant way, the one that needs no machine and no power bill, is worth saving, then do me a kindness right now and subscribe to this channel and help me keep this old mountain knowledge alive, because this is exactly the wisdom that gets lost in a single generation, traded for a machine that hums in the corner, and I do not want it gone. So let me show you, step by step, and I will start with the simplest and most magical, the things that drink the water right out of the air. The old folks knew that certain common substances are thirsty. They naturally pull moisture from the air and hold it, and you can set them out in a damp room in a simple open dish, and they will quietly dry the air for you. No power, no noise, for pennies. The greatest of these, and the one sitting in your kitchen right now, is salt. Salt is deeply thirsty. It pulls water from the air like nothing else, and the old folks used it everywhere damp was a problem. Here is how you do it. You take a good amount of salt, the cheap, coarse kind, and you put it in a bowl, or better still, in a container with holes, and you set it in the damp spot, the corner, the closet, the cellar, the windowsill. Over the days that salt draws the moisture out of the air and gets damp and clumps together, and when it is wet through you, dry it out again by warming it, or you simply replace it, and it costs almost nothing. For a stronger version, the old folks made a simple catcher. They would set a smaller container of salt up inside a larger one, so the water the salt pulls from the air drips down and collects in the bottom, and you pour off the water and keep the salt working. A few of these bowls of salt, placed around a damp room, will steadily pull the wet out of the air, silently, with no power at all, doing the very job that expensive machine does for the price of a bag of salt. There are other thirsty things the old folks knew too. Lime, the kind used in building, is even thirstier than salt and was used in cellars to keep them dry. And even a lump of chalk hung in a wardrobe draws a little damp from the air. The whole idea is the same. Set out something thirsty, let it drink the air dry, and renew it when it is full. Now stay with me, because drinking the moisture from the air helps, but the old folks knew you have to deal with where the moisture is coming from, and this next part is where the real cure begins. Every bit of damp in a home comes from a source, and the most important thing you can do is find it and cut it off. Here is what the old folks watched for, and what you must find. First, the moisture we make ourselves inside the home, which is far more than people think. Every pot boiling on the stove, every kettle, every hot bath and shower, every wet washing hung up to dry indoors, every breath we breathe through the night, all of it puts water into the air of the house. And in a closed-up room with nowhere for it to go, it settles on the cold walls and windows and breeds damp and mold. The old folks knew to let that moisture out. So the single most powerful thing, and it costs nothing, is air. You open the windows, you let the house breathe. The old folks threw the windows open every day, even in the cold, even for just a little while, to let the moist, stale air out and the fresh, dry air in, because they knew that a house that cannot breathe grows damp and sick. When you cook, you cover the pots to trap the steam, and you open a window. When you bathe, you let the steam out. When you dry the washing, you hang it outside if you possibly can, in the sun and wind, not dripping in a closed room, because wet washing dried indoors is one of the biggest sources of damp there is. Just letting the home breathe and not trapping the moisture we ourselves make inside it cures half the damp in most houses, and it does not cost a single penny or a single watt. And here is a micro-secret about the air that the old folks knew. It is not just letting it out, it is moving it. Still air is where damp settles, especially in the cold corners and behind the furniture where the air never stirs, and that is exactly where the mold blooms. So the old folks made sure the air could move through the whole room. They did not push the furniture tight against the cold outer walls where the air would be trapped and the damp would gather behind it. They left a gap so the air could flow behind the wardrobe and the bed. They did not stuff the closets so full that air could not move among the clothes. They kept the doors open between rooms so the air flowed through the whole house instead of sitting dead in one closed room. Moving air carries moisture away and keeps it from settling, and a room where the air can flow freely, behind the furniture and through the closets and between the rooms, stays far drier than a closed-up, stuffed-up room where the air sits still and cold. Pull the furniture an inch off the cold wall, leave the inner doors open, let the air move, and you take away the still cold pockets where the mold loves to grow. Now stay close, because the other great source of damp comes not from inside, but from outside and below, and the old folks were sharp about this. Water gets into a home from the ground it sits on and from the rain that falls on it, and you have to keep it out. So the old folks made sure the rain was carried away from the house, the gutters clear and flowing, the water led away from the walls and the foundation. Never left a pool against the base of the house where it would soak in and rise up through the walls. They made sure the ground sloped away from the house so the rain ran off and did not gather. They kept the roof sound and the windows sealed so the rain could not find its way in. And for the damp that rises up from the very ground beneath a house, especially in a cellar, they kept those low spaces aired and used the thirsty lime and salt and kept things up off the cold floor. You do the same. You walk around your house when it rains and you see where the water goes and you make sure it goes away from the walls, you clear the gutters, you fix the leak, you seal the gap, you lead the water off. Because no amount of drinking the air dry inside will ever win if water is steadily soaking in from a blocked gutter or a puddle against the wall outside. Cut off the water coming in from outside and below, and you have stopped the damp at its deepest source. Now let me tell you how the old folks dealt with the mold that has already grown, because once damp has bloomed into those black spots you have to clean it away, and they did it safely with simple things. The great mold killer the old folks reached for was vinegar, plain vinegar, which kills most household mold right down into the surface, better, in fact, than many of the things people buy. Here is how you use it. You take plain vinegar, undiluted for a tough spot, and you wipe or spray it right onto the mold, and you let it sit and work for a good while, an hour, before you wipe and scrub it away, and then you let the spot dry fully, because mold cannot come back on a surface that stays dry. For scrubbing, a paste of baking soda gives you a gentle scouring power and helps absorb the damp and the smell, and the old folks used it together with the vinegar to kill, soda to scrub and freshen. And the oldest cure of all for mold, free and powerful, is sunlight, because the sun's light kills mold, so anything you can carry outside into the bright sun, the moldy clothes, the cushions, the boots, the mattress, you put out in the full sun to be dried and cleaned by the light. Now here is an honest and important word, because we always tell the truth on this channel. Mold can be harmful to breathe, so when you clean a real patch of it, you take care. You open the windows for air. You do not breathe the dust. You protect your hands and your nose and mouth. And a small spot you can clean yourself, but a large spread of black mold over a whole wall is a sign of a serious damp problem and a real health risk, and that is the time to get proper help to find and fix the source. Not just wipe at the surface. Clean the mold, yes, but always remember the mold is only the messenger telling you that something is too damp, and the real cure is always to dry the source. Let me give you a handful of quick old tricks now to round it out. A bowl of baking soda left open in a damp, musty room absorbs both moisture and the smell, like the salt, but with the bonus of freshening the air. Charcoal, plain lump charcoal, is wonderfully thirsty and was used to keep damp spaces and closets dry and odor-free. A few lumps in a tin with holes tucked in a damp closet drinks the moisture and kills the must. Dried herbs and lavender tucked among stored clothes and linens keep them fresh and fight the musty smell while you keep the air dry. Leaving a low light or a little gentle warmth in a very cold, damp space, like the old folks kept a space just barely warm so the walls never went stone cold, because the coldest surfaces are where the moisture settles. So taking the deep chill off a room helps keep it dry. Wiping the windows dry each morning where they have run with condensation overnight, so that water does not run down and soak the sills and breed the mold along the frame. Each of these is cheap, simple, needs no power, and backs up the main work of drinking the air dry, letting the home breathe, and cutting off the source. And here is a gentle one the old folks knew about warmth, because a little warmth is one of the best cures for damp there is, and it need not cost much. Damp settles on the coldest surfaces, the cold outer wall, the cold window, the cold floor, because cold air cannot hold its moisture and lets it go onto the nearest cold thing, which is why the corner of an unheated room is where the mold blooms first. So taking the deep chill off a damp space helps the air hold its moisture and carry it away instead of dropping it on the walls. The old folks did not heat a whole house they could not afford to heat, but they kept a gentle warmth where they needed it, a banked fire, a warm stone, just enough to keep the worst surfaces from going stone cold and streaming with wet. Even today, a little gentle, steady warmth in a cold, damp room, just taking the edge off the chill, does far more good than letting it sit freezing and wet, and a barely warm room that breathes is a dry room. The key the old folks understood was to warm gently and air well together, because warming a closed room only without letting it breathe just lifts the moisture into the air to settle again. But warming a little and airing a little together carries the moisture right out of the house. Warmth and fresh air, hand in hand, the old balance, and the walls stay dry. Now I owe you a fuller, honest word, because damp and mold touch your health directly, and the old folks took that seriously. A damp home is not just uncomfortable, the mold and the damp air can settle on the chest and worsen coughs and wheezes and breathing trouble, especially for the very young and the very old, and anyone whose lungs are already weak. And the old folks knew that a damp house made for a sick house, which is exactly why they worked so hard to keep their homes dry. So this is not just about saving a wall or a power bill, it is about the air your family breathes. Do the simple things faithfully. Dry the air the rooms, cut off the water, clean the mold, and you protect not just your home but the health of everyone in it. And if anyone in the house has a real breathing trouble that the damp seems to worsen, that is always worth a word with a doctor, because some things are beyond any old remedy, and there is wisdom in knowing it. Let me give you a few more thirsty things to make your own moisture catchers, because once you understand the idea, you can set them everywhere damp hides. Plain rice is thirsty, the same rice in your cupboard, and a bowl or a cloth bag of dry rice tucked into a damp drawer or a closet or a cupboard drinks the moisture quietly, which is the very same reason the old folks and many people still keep a few grains of rice in the salt to keep it dry. A bag of rice in the corner of a musty wardrobe works like a tiny dehumidifier for pennies, and when it feels damp, you dry it out in the warmth of the stove and use it again and again. Chalk, plain sticks of chalk bundled together and hung in a closet, draws the damp from the air around your clothes, an old trick for keeping a wardrobe dry and fresh. Even a folded newspaper laid in the bottom of a damp drawer or inside damp boots overnight drinks the moisture right up, which is why the old folks stuffed wet boots with paper to dry them. The whole secret is to look at a damp spot and ask, what thirsty thing can I tuck in here to drink the air dry and then renew it when it is full? Salt and lime and charcoal for the bigger spaces, rice and chalk and paper for the small ones, and not a single one of them needs power or makes a sound. Let me talk about the closets and the stored clothes and linens, because this is where damp does its quiet damage that breaks the heart. The good coat gone musty, the stored blankets spotted with mold, the boots growing green in the back of the cupboard. The old folks protected their stored things with care. First, they never put anything away damp, because a single damp garment folded into a closed drawer will breed mold and spread that musty smell to everything around it. So they made sure everything was bone dry before it was stored, aired and sunned first. Then they kept the air moving even in storage, not stuffing the closet so full that the air could not stir, leaving a little space, and now and then opening the closet and the chest to let it breathe, and even taking the stored things out into the fresh air and sun on a fine day, the old habit of airing the linens. They tucked in the thirsty things, the chalk and the rice and the charcoal, to keep the enclosed air dry, and the dried lavender and herbs to keep it fresh and fight the must. And they kept the stored things up off any cold, damp floor. Do the same with your own closets and chests. Store nothing damp, leave room for air, tuck in something thirsty, air it out on fine days, and your good clothes and blankets will come out of storage as fresh as they went in, instead of musty and spotted and ruined. Let me give you a special word on the cellar and the low rooms, because that is where damp is worst of all, the cold underground space where the wet rises from the very ground and the air sits still and cold and never warms. The old folks relied on their cellars to keep food through the winter, so they had to master the damp down there, and they did. They kept the cellar aired, opening it up to let the air change whenever the outside air was drier than the air within, which is the key. You air a cellar when the day outside is dry and breezy, not when it is wet and foggy, or you only bring more damp in. They used the thirstiest catchers down there, the lime and the salt and the charcoal in good quantity, renewed often. They kept things up off the cold floor on shelves and racks so the rising damp could not reach them and the air could flow underneath. They led the water away from outside so it could not seep through the cellar walls, and they kept those walls and floors as dry as they could. And they took the deep chill off where they could, because the coldest surfaces gather the most moisture. If you have a damp cellar or basement or a cold low room, these are the ways: air it on the dry days, set out the thirsty catchers in quantity, keep everything up off the floor, lead the outside water away, and take the worst of the chill off. And even that hardest, dampest space can be kept dry the old way, with no machine at all. Now let me have you think for a moment about what this saves you, because beyond the comfort and the health, there is real money in it. An electric dehumidifier is not cheap to buy, and then it runs and runs, day and night through the damp season, and a machine running like that pulls power steadily and adds it to your bill every single month for as long as you own it, year after year. Then it wears out and you buy another. Over the years, that is hundreds, even thousands of dollars, to do a job the old folks did for the price of a bag of salt and the opening of a window. And the damp itself, left unchecked, costs far more. The ruined plaster, the rotted wood, the spoiled clothes and furniture, the repairs, all of it money lost to a problem that simple habits would have prevented. The old mountain folk could not have paid those costs even if they had wanted to, which is exactly why they learned to keep their homes dry for almost nothing, and with prices the way they are now, neither can most of us. This is real money kept in your pocket every month for the rest of your life, and a home protected from the slow ruin that damp brings, all for a handful of cheap habits and a few bowls of salt. And now, here it is, the last trick, the real secret, the one that gets to the very root of damp and ends it instead of mopping it up forever. And it is this: damp is not really a thing you remove, it is a balance you keep. A home is always taking in a little moisture, from the air, from the cooking, from the breathing, from the rain and the ground, and a healthy, dry home is simply one where as much moisture leaves as comes in, where the air moves and breathes and carries the wet away as fast as it arrives, where the cold, still pockets are kept stirred, and the water from outside is led away, and the thirsty salt drinks up the rest. The machine in the corner treats damp as an enemy to be fought with power forever, but the old folks treated it as a balance to be kept with habit, and that is the whole secret. It is not one trick, it is a way of living in a house. You open the windows each day out of habit. You cover the pots and air the bathroom and dry the washing outside out of habit. You leave the gap behind the furniture and the doors open between the rooms out of habit. You keep the gutters clear and the water led away out of habit. You set out the salt and the charcoal and renew them out of habit. None of it is hard, none of it costs much, and none of it needs a watt of power, and together these habits keep the whole home in that dry, breathing, healthy balance, season after season, the way the old mountain folk kept their homes dry in the wettest air there is. That is the secret. Not a machine that fights the damp. A handful of simple daily habits that keep the home so balanced the damp never gets a hold in the first place. Live that way. And you will never again walk into a room and smell that musty smell or find that black bloom in the corner, because your whole home will simply stay dry, on its own, the old way. So that is the forgotten mountain way of keeping any room dry and free of mold, with no machine and no power bill. The thirsty salt and charcoal and lime that drink the moisture right out of the air. The opening of the windows and the airing of the rooms that let the home breathe out the moisture we make inside it. The moving of the air behind the furniture and through the doors so the damp never settles in the cold, still corners. The clearing of the gutters and the leading away of the water so the rain and the ground cannot soak in. The vinegar and the soda and the sunlight that kill and clean away the mold that has already grown. And above all, the simple daily habits that keep the whole home in dry, breathing balance. Not one machine humming in the corner, not 1 watt of power, not one line on the power bill. The old mountain families lived in some of the coldest, wettest air there is, with no electricity at all, and they kept their homes dry and fresh and healthy through it all, because they understood that damp is a balance you keep with habit, not an enemy you fight with a machine. We have the machines now, and we still walk into musty rooms and find the black mold in the corner because we forgot the simple wisdom the old folks lived by. But you do not have to. You can do it their way, the self-reliant way, the way that needs no power and costs almost nothing, and breathe clean, dry air again. So here is what I want you to do. Tonight, before bed, open the windows in the dampest room for a little while and let the air change, and set a bowl of salt in the worst corner, and in the morning wipe the windows dry where they have run. Just those 3 small things, and you will already feel the room begin to change. Then build the habits one by one from there. And come tell me in the comments, did your family keep the damp out the old way too? Did your grandmother throw the windows open every morning and set out the bowls of salt and dry the washing in the sun? And where in the world are you watching from tonight? Because I love to see how far this old wisdom travels. If this video helped you or stirred a memory, subscribe and stay with me, so together we can keep these old mountain ways alive, the self-reliant ways that kept a home dry and healthy with no machine at all, before they slip away for good. They knew how to keep a home, those old folks, and they have so much left to teach us. I will see you in the next one.